The U.S. government is going to have to pick between inflation and deflation in order to deal with the debt crisis, and it's going to pick hyperinflation.
You think so?
Yes.
Well, I don't know. Like,
Okay.
it's interesting. Like, because first of all, those aren't the only two things, deflation or hyperinflation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So things can be deflationary as they are. So think about what's deflationary? A new car, a computer, right? There's all kinds of things that are deflationary. So you can have, I think George Gammon gave me the best example. He said, you think of a hot air balloon that's going up, that's inflation. And then you have a hole in it, that's deflation. So it doesn't have to be just one thing. If that makes sense.
So what do you think would hyperinflate?
Well, I think we're going to have what I would consider to be long-term elevated inflation.
Okay.
So all right.
Is that
But let's talk about what hyperinflation is.
okay?
Okay. So hyperinflation, the actual technical term, is 50% a month. And is that what it is, Jerry? It's 50% a month. It's 50% inflation a month. That's hyperinflation. Now, that's Zimbabwe, Yugoslavia, Venezuela, Argentina, Brazil, Nicaragua, Peru, Lebanon. Like, those are just some of the ones in the last 50 years. They've experienced hyperinflation. So, do I think the U.S. is going to experience that? I do not, least in the short term. Could they? Yes. But I think that we're in for a period of elevated inflation.
But if it gets away from them, it could definitely hyperinflate because no country ever sees hyperinflation coming. It just
Without a
something
doubt.
happens and it hits.
Well, right, because I did a little research on this, and I love this one quote. No economy can overcome math. I love that, right?
Right.
Because one of the things that I looked at, and where is it? Oh, guess how much, this is crazy. Guess what the monetary expansion for the U.S. dollar has been since 1971? What percent? Anybody? Type it in. What do you think the monetary expansion percentage has been for the U.S. dollar?
You're going to have to tell everyone because no one's going to know that.
8,250%. That's a fact. So that's actually what we're talking about here. You know, the expansion, printing. And in all of those cases, if you go back and look at like Weimar, Germany, and, Hungary and Mexico, let's say, and Mexico is a little different, but they devalued the peso. I remember that actually in 93. And then NAFTA, of course, 94. That's interesting. NAFTA is the North America Free Trade Agreement. But, you start to look at what happens during this period of time. And I think that's actually what I really want to discuss. I know you do too. If we're in a period of high inflation or a period of hyperinflation, what can we do?
Well, before we get to that, we need to break this down more for people.
Sure.
We're just jumping ahead, like always.
I love it. I love it.
So anyways, Jerry, can you bring up the debt clock for the U.S.? So right now, we are $36 trillion
upper left, guys.
in debt.
Look at that.
And
That's
it's like
the national
rising
debt.
by the second. But I think the biggest thing is that this used to be a major talking point, balancing the budget. Jerry, you can pull that down. Was a major talking point for the candidates for the election, right? Neither Harris nor Trump was talking about balancing a budget because they can't be balanced, right? So, under different estimates, Vice President Harris was going to increase the federal spending for $4 trillion through 2035, and President Trump, it was like $7 trillion.
Yeah.
And granted, now some of these policies were to then hopefully stimulate more economic growth, but Obama added to the national debt, Trump added historically the most to the national debt, and then Biden added more than Trump. So every year they're adding more and more national debt, right? And Jerry, if you could bring up the first chart, the growing national debt.
Love that debt clock.
So if you're looking at this, I mean, look, we have now it's even more than, it is on that running debt clock.
Take a look at that, Jerry. That's insane.
Yeah.
Look, so guys, like, you doesn't matter. Like, hopefully you guys aren't getting ultra political here, because this is a shot of the past. There's red, there's blue, all part of this. All right. So, and we can point fingers and all that stuff, but at the end of the day, the U.S. owes things, right? We owe for entitlements. We spent a lot of money during the pandemic, right? Rightly so, right or wrong, but we did. And then now we're funding wars, and there's all kinds of things. And as you start to take a look at where we're heading moving forward, you have to consider this. You have to consider the fact that we owe, as America ages, we owe money for Medicare, Medicaid. We owe money for Social Security. These are things that we owe. In addition to that, don't forget about infrastructure, right? Don't forget about defense spending and all these other things. Just like you guys have a budget for the way you live your life or your business or for your home, the U.S. has a budget, and there's lots of line items on there.
Well, and I think the biggest thing, and this is going to tie into what we're saying, so you have to think about all this. So the biggest income generator for the government is individual taxes.
Right.
That is it. That individual tax is very important for the government. Right now, we'll collect this year about $5 trillion in individual taxes.
Do you want to pull up that chart that Jerry had up? The one that you made, Jerry?
Sure.
Right there. Look at
But
that.
we have spent $7 trillion, okay?
So on the left are receipts.
Yeah, so we have collected 5, spent 7. So just right now, as it is right now, we're losing $2 trillion a year. And the things that we're spending money on, we can't really cut, you guys. The problem is we can't really cut the budget. Like, it's Social Security, it's Medicare, Medicaid, it's interest on our debt, it's national defense, and, these other things are just smaller things, but we can't really cut any of this stuff. Like, it's not like we're needlessly spending. Like, people live off of this money. So how are we ever going to balance the budget? And the truth is we're just not. We're just going to keep printing money to pay for the budget, because to Ken's point, he had asked me, do we actually really pay our debts? And we do. We print money to pay our debts. So we're printing all this additional money to pay this negative balance we have.
Let's keep this up real quick, Jerry. I think it's important that people understand, like, let's bring this down to your own situation. If you just dropped a couple zeros, right, and you made $49,200, let's say, on the left, total receipts, and you were spending $67,000, that's how you look at it.
Right.
What you're making on income is not covering expense. And so this is what Danille's saying. At the very minimum, now this does not include a lot of stuff, and that's why that debt clock was important. You're at $2 trillion.
So let's be the devil's advocate here. You hear a lot about taxing billionaires. Let's tax billionaires. So Jerry, can you play that YouTube video? And
a lot of people say taxing billionaires could solve our problems. Would that really work? Seizing every home, yacht, business, and investment from America's 800 billionaires would fund the federal government for just 9 months. And then the money would be gone. So would your 401k, given that most of this wealth would be seized from the stock market, causing the S&P 500 to crater. There simply aren't enough millionaires, billionaires, and undertaxed corporations to close Social Security and Medicare's projected $124 trillion cash shortfall over 3 decades.
Understand that 124 trillion is over 3 decades. What we were showing you was 1 year.
Right. But I'm just saying, so like everyone always goes to taxing the billionaires, right? Because that's an easy thing for politicians to say. We just need to tax the billionaires. We need to tax corporations. But the truth is like, okay, we tax the billionaires. How much does that really actually help us? Because we're 2 trillion a year negative. And it's not just 2 trillion. It grows every single year. So it's not like, okay, we're just 2 trillion forever. Like, no, this is exponential. It builds on top of each other. And so as we increase spending, we're going to increase this 2 trillion to even more every single year. And that's how you're starting to get this runaway inflation. And the only way to fix this problem is to cut, right? Like cutting Social Security, cutting Medicare, having a recession, everything else. But we go back to, if we have a crater in the economy, then the federal government doesn't get those income taxes if people aren't working. So that puts us more at a deficit. So you have to kind of look at that as like, we can't afford for the S&P 500 to crash because a lot of our tax comes from the money people are making.
Right. That would be a disaster, guys.
Right.
Everything is going to be inflated. Back to kind of the original point was, which way will it go? Things can be deflationary. So housing prices can come down in an inflationary economy. That can happen, but you can't hang your whole hat on it, and on the billionaire seat, that's a political hot potato that I think they use. And it resonates with the middle class. I completely get it. But, it's going to be interesting to see what Trump does with that, because think about where all of the billionaires are. They're on the coasts, and the coasts are predominantly blue, right? They are, like Seattle. We'll jump over Oregon down to California, but certainly New York. So, I'm not saying that the billionaires are blue, but I'm saying the states are. So, it's going to be interesting to see. I would imagine there's going to be some taxing. You have to. There's going to be things all over the place. He also said that he was going to try to cut out of the government spending side. That's another, obviously, low-hanging fruit. But again, to your point, we just need to get to that point where the revenue is paying for the expense.
But we're not going to get to that point. And that's the thing. And Jeff on here, he said we can cut some but still grow, and we can. But no politician's talking about cutting. Not one. They're not talking about cutting spending. That's not a talking point for either side right now, because we can't really afford, think about just even the households, right? Like everybody's pinched right now by inflation. I mean, really pinched, working 2-3 jobs. Can we afford to go through a recession? Can we afford to have people losing their jobs? No, because we can't afford that as a country. And then the government can't afford that either, because it needs the tax from people working.
Right. It's true. Right. And so that's why I still believe that we're going to see this extended long-term elevated inflation. I think that we can't. I mean, it would be an administration's nightmare to have either deflation, which would be probably the nuclear bomb, or elevated inflation, and they're going to continue to regulate it with interest rates and the ways that they have done that.
I think it's interesting. You had hit on that Zimbabwe hit hyperinflation in 2008. Germany had it after the war. But right now, there are 15 countries experiencing hyperinflation at this time. So everyone always thinks that it's like this thing that won't happen. You know what I mean? You're like, oh, whatever, hyperinflation, that won't happen. And the truth is it's hitting a lot of different countries. So whether we have hyperinflation or just mass inflation over the next few years, the strategy doesn't change. So I thought what might be interesting is pulling up on YouTube people from Argentina, because they've been hitting hyperinflation for a while now. And I wanted to see what they're doing in their country to maintain wealth. So Jerry, if you can pull up that YouTube video.
First thing is, don't worry. Here in Argentina, we are very we are very well worst, and we survive. First advice. Second advice, perhaps buy things.
Y lo primero que le diría es que pelee por su sueldo, porque todos merecemos ganar bien.
Creo que es fundamental para los americanos que toman mucho crédito y invertirlo, ¿no?
And don't leave your money resting under the couch because it's useless.
From my point of view, is to buy things. Actually, a house, a small house for rent.
Take advantage of volatility. Keep in mind that you have to be like really aggressive with opportunities because inflation makes market moves really fast, and all the time volatility is too high, so you can find very good entry points. Look, this guy just bought one Ferrari. That's incredible.
So
Check that out.
it's interesting, right? These are real people with real experiences with massive inflation. So what points did we pull from that?
Yeah. Well, there's a few things that I pulled. Number one is currency is worthless, right? And certainly was that case. But what actually does rise are any kind of assets. So in other words, a couch is more important than the cash. It's interesting, right?
Yeah.
Because the couch, as cash is worthless. So he said, but the other thing is, things that move with inflation. Things get more expensive with inflation. The one thing I loved, obviously, when the woman was talking about rentals and real estate, of course, that's where we sit. But what I really want you to understand is when in periods of high inflation, what happens to debt? So this is you got to wrap your head around this. So let's say you have a $500,000 home and you have $400,000 in debt. You have $100,000 in equity. During inflation, and that house, let's say, goes up to $600,000, $700,000, $800,000, you still have $400,000 in debt. On hyperinflation, you still have $400,000 in debt. So your debt becomes easier to pay off with inflated dollars. That's what hyperinflation does. So that's why, because the country's getting in debt, you want to be in debt. Oddly enough, fixed debt, by the way.
Fixed, yeah.
Fixed debt.
But how about so correct. And those payments become easier because obviously you're going to make more money at work. And we just saw this in the last 4 years, right? Like everyone got raises at work, but certain people are still more pinched. Well, who are the people that are more pinched? The people that are renting. People that are owning, they got a raise, their mortgage stayed the same, they have all this extra money. And that's because they own this asset with fixed debt on it. But what about those people that can't afford to buy a home, right? Because we don't want to exclude them because there's a lot of people right now like, well, if I can't afford to buy a home, this is pointless to me. But I liked what the last guy said, and he was mentioning market volatility. And that can be crypto, that can be the stock market, that can be anything, because all these people don't want to hold on to cash during times of high inflation. The wealthy people don't want to hold on to cash because, like that guy said, it's losing money underneath your couch. Like every day it loses value. So they're investing it. So where are they investing it? They're investing it in the real estate, stock market, and the crypto market, and gold, and those kind of things. So even if it feels high, if you jump in, what he was saying was, don't be afraid of the volatility. You have to get in. You can't just hoard your cash. You have to invest it. And you have to take that risk because these markets are going to keep going up, up, and up because the wealthy are investing their money. Everyone's investing. Nobody's holding money. And right now, that's hard for us to understand because we have U.S. dollars. But if we keep having, whether it's hyperinflation or massive inflation over the next 10 years, your money that you're saving isn't worth anything.
The other thing is, you guys, I would encourage you to jump over to George Gammon's channel and take a look at, he actually took gold, silver, him and Josh, gold, silver, Bitcoin, and some American dollars. And they drove through Argentina. It's fascinating videos. Just take a look. And here's what they found. They found that nobody wanted gold. Nobody took it. Nobody took Bitcoin. In fact, he said all the Bitcoin cafes that they thought that they were there weren't there. It was all fabricated. There weren't a lot of people that were taking Bitcoin. At least that's what they found. but everybody wanted U.S. dollars. And I said, what kind? He goes, not 20s, not 50s, only hundreds.
But that's because the U.S. dollar is still the reserve currency, and but that's going to change as we inflate it away.
Correct.
Like, that's not going to be the same in 10 years from now.
This is just Argentina. This is what they wanted. And the point is, I think that's what's interesting is one of the things that another country can do is they can get out of their dollars into another currency. And that's actually what they're doing.
Well, and that's what Maniac just said. They said just because somebody doesn't take Bitcoin doesn't make it worthless, because you can convert it to U.S. dollars. There's still value there.
You're right.
So
the other thing I do want to point out, there's another phenomenon going on, if you guys think about this. You guys all love Amazon just as much as we love Amazon, okay? There's an overwhelming majority of things that get made out of Asia, China, out of the country on Amazon. So we technically are exporting inflation to other countries by paying for those goods and services out of U.S. dollars. So a lot of the U.S. dollars that we're printing actually are getting exported to other countries. And I haven't actually taken this all the way down, but it's interesting that a lot of the other countries right now are experiencing this high inflation because, we're not the only one, but we are a massive, large world consumer of goods. And the world is, providing us with those, and we pay for those in U.S. dollars. And so as we also print, it affects who is ever holding those dollars in those other countries. Kind of to your point about what you said. So the question is which currency is deflating faster? Like, is it ours? Is ours devaluing faster than Argentina? The answer is no. So they jump into the U.S. currency. Also, you can spend U.S. currency in all kinds of places. It doesn't solve for the fact of where we're headed,
It doesn't. And Jerry, if you can pull up that government sites on the budget. And this is from, this website, but also this other one. Oh, not this, Jerry, the article in the budget. But it's interesting because these things are coming straight from the government. So this is from the government site. It says budget deficits that grow faster than the economy ultimately become unsustainable. As the government attempts to finance its interest payments by issuing more debt, which is what we're doing, the rise in deficits accelerate. That in turn leads to a vicious cycle in which the government issues ever larger amounts of debt in order to pay ever higher interest charges. In the end, the cost of servicing the debt outstrips the economic resources available for financing those expenditures. And that's when you start to have hyperinflation. So here it says taxes must be raised or spending must be reduced or both, because this was from 15 years ago when they were trying to balance the budget. But now that doesn't seem to be a priority.
Right. And if, how do you get around this, guys? So how does the common person look for a store of value? Because that's actually what we're looking for. What's a store of value? Is money a store of value? Is savings a store of value? Arguably, no. Not if, just take a look at if you had 10 grand in your bank 2 years ago, does it buy you the same goods and services today? Period. And if the answer is no, then it's not a good store of value. So what is a good store of value? And I would say anything that's non-perishable, other currency, gold, silver, of course. This is precisely why Bitcoin, there's a debate on, I know the Bitcoiners, there's a debate on whether or not it's a store of value or not, Bitcoin. We're not going to go down that road today, but you got to wonder, why is Bitcoin on a run right now? Because people are concerned about being in cash. That's valid.
Well, and I also think it's on a run because anybody can get into it. Because a lot of people on the channel are saying, I can't afford to buy a house. Yeah. They might not be able to afford to buy a gold coin. That's, but you can buy just a little bit of Bitcoin, right?
Look at that.
And so you can buy $20 in Bitcoin, So I think that's partially why it's on a run, is because people can invest in any
Go back to one
area.
year, Jerry. Can you do that? Let's see if we can. I'd love to see that. Year to date. Look at that. Started under 50.
Well, it was at 74 the other day, so
but
it's
look at it
went
in
on a
1 year's
run.
period of time.
Mm-hmm.
Clearly, if you've been in Bitcoin, you've done really well. And you got to wonder why. I think people are starting to wake up to inflation, and the cash that they have is buying less. The raise that they got isn't covering what they need. Expenses are going up. I know Danille's, like I've told this story before, but Danille tries to pretend like that she's such a great shopper in the grocery store every time, but she has the same 15 things every time. And so it's pretty easy to see that your grocery bill's doubled.
Yeah, groceries are going up. Everything's going up. I mean, I don't think it's just groceries. It's just everything. And everyone is very squeezed. I'm in a lot of forums and people know that they're squeezed. And what we're trying to do is teach you guys how to, be in a better position 5 years from now than the average American. And that's going to be with not saving your money, unfortunately. Like, you need to invest it in something, whether it's real estate, whether it's gold, whether it's crypto, whether it's, anything, a small business, like just holding on to your money. You heard those people in Argentina, like you don't do that. And don't be like the last to know. They all understand this now because they've been dealing with hyperinflation for so long, but don't be the last to know. Don't be the last to get there. Get there now because, if there is a great melt up and everything is starting to increase in price because the wealthy need to put their money somewhere, then of course home prices are going to increase. Of course gold's going to increase. Of course crypto is going to increase. Of course the S&P 500 is going to go up. Don't be the last to know because you're sitting here right now waiting for some crash and all the signs aren't pointing to a crash because the wealthy need to store their money. And the only way they can do that is by investing in all this stuff, right? So don't be sitting there the last to know, I don't want to buy a house yet, or I don't want to invest in Bitcoin yet, or I don't want to do the S&P 500 right now because it all seems really high. Because we're telling you that's just not the realization of this market with this high inflation.
If you guys are sitting in cash, you're falling behind. Let me say that again. If you're sitting in cash, you're falling behind, period. Okay, because even the Fed on their own website says that their target's 2%. Now, they're saying it's in the 3s, but who knows? But let's just look. Like the house we're in right now, we built. 15 years ago, we built it, right? And I built it with a construction loan, and I've lived in it the whole time. And guess what? The house is worth a lot more. And the debt, I basically paid it off, but it was a long time ago. It was 15 years ago. Imagine what it was. Now, the house did go up and down in price, just like yours, just like a lot of people's. But a lot of people think real estate investing is really, really difficult. Just let the economy do its thing, and when there's a lot of people that have done really, really well based on inflation, what it's done to real estate. It's luck. It's timing. Now, you can certainly purchase incorrectly as well, and that's the whole point of this channel, is to make sure that you guys are cash flowing. But I bought stuff that's gone down in value. In fact, I built the house in 2008, 2009, right around the crash time. Now, I was already under construction. Did I want to crash? No, but it happened right in the middle. And my house value went down, but it was my house, so I just lived in it for a long time. And at some point, it broke even. I don't know what it went back to what I thought it was going to be. And now it's way above. And the result is not because I'm so damn smart about my own primary residence. It's because of inflation.
And Pillar said on YouTube, money needs to keep moving. It's a cycle. And so put your money in a good cycle. And Jerry, if you can pull up the next short that we have, the last one.
In all the years I've been coming to Buenos Aires, the biggest change is always the money. In 2005, my rent was 360 pesos. In 2022, I could buy a coffee for 360 pesos. Now in 2024, a cup of coffee costs 3,600 pesos.
So I thought that was pretty pivotal, right? So and I know they have hyperinflation, and whether you not think we're going to get hyperinflation or we're just going to get massive inflation, either way, a cup of coffee equaled rent within 10 years. And then now a cup of coffee is 100 times what rent was. So the point is that if you're investing now and you have a mortgage and it's $3,000, right? And you're like, that's a lot of money. Is it going to be a lot of money in 10 years?
I think it did the Dave Ramsey advice, just cut out that cup of coffee and you'll be fine. So this is precisely the thing, guys. Like you have to just take a look at the expenses the government has in front of them. Okay. Yes, there'll be taxes, and yes, there'll be all kinds of things, and they're going after us for property taxes and personal tax and corporate tax and all that kind of stuff. That is one piece of the revenue, of course, that's always going to be up for grabs. But the expenses, the fixed incomes of a lot of people. I always bring up my mom, but my mom, I was telling Danille this, when my mom fell during COVID and got hurt and had to have an operation. So we put her into an assisted care facility because she needed 24/7 care. And actually, she now loves it. But the point is, so we rented her house, and at the time, her house covered her expenses. So, which was cool. The house that I grew up in, she still has. The rent covered her monthly. So she was happy, net. Now it's $1,000 underwater a month, because their costs have gone up.
At the assisted
At the facility, right. So now the rent doesn't cover the expenses. So it's starting to make its way into the labor costs, the food costs, and utilities and all the things of where she's staying. Now, she's obviously going to be fine. The family's taking care of her. But the point is, those are real things. That's what people are starting to recognize, and that's why I think that's why people are starting to blow up gold. Gold is, what was it last? It's like is it 2,700, something like that? And that's really, really high. Silver's in the 30s now. Bitcoin's going crazy, and it's a result of this money printing machine that we've got.
Well, and I do think that it's interesting. StarPath just said that he or she lived in Romania in the 90s and went through hyperinflation. And bread was 1 RON, which I guess is their currency. And then within 7 years, it was 10,000 RON. So even if we don't have like the math, like that's with hyperinflation, right? But say we just had 1/10 of that. Say it was 1 RON and then it went to 1,000 RON, or 100 RON. Like that's like a big difference. And the rent is going to do the same thing. Like I didn't ask them, but I'm sure the rent went up as well massively. And so if you own assets and houses and things and items, that inflation's not going to affect you because as much because that $200,000 house or $400,000 house you bought is now $800,000, right? Versus if you just had this money in the bank and you just put it into savings and you just watched it dwindle away. So I guess the whole point of today is for you to understand that if you're waiting for the market to crash and sitting on a bunch of money, then that's not a good strategy right now, because we are having inflation, and every day that money you're sitting on is worth less and less.
Yeah. Just Google this, guys. The same thing we did, getting prepared for this. If there's high inflation, what should I invest in? Mm-hmm. Period. And there's going to be multiple examples on the internet, but there's always the core 4 or 5, always, right? And do that, because we just want you on the right side. If you're sitting in cash, you're going to be in big trouble.
Yeah, and it's definitely not a political issue, and don't make it one, because it doesn't matter if it's under Trump or it was under Harris or it's under whoever runs in 2028.
They're both going to spend.
They're going to spend, and it's just a vicious cycle. We're having inflation. Now, sure, different administrations have different ways of handling it, but it's still going to be an issue, and this advice is still going to be relevant.
Yep. Oh, there you go, Jerry. Nice. Yeah.
So anyways, let's hop into our questions for the week. And also make sure you guys are checking out our podcast. It goes out every Thursday. It's the Ken McElroy Show, where we dive into these issues a little more deeply. And we also talk a lot about MC Companies, which is Ken's company. They own 10,000 units. He definitely knows a little bit about real estate.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, we go to a lot more detail, guys, if you want to hear that.
Yep. All right. So our first question comes from Eric. He said, what is the big thing that makes a difference between a deal that works and one that doesn't?
Oh, so many things. Cost of capital. So think of interest rates, right? So a lot of the people that are going down right now had a lot of floating debt. So the finance costs, or OPM, are other people's money for sure. The other thing is cash flow. So what you always want is fixed rate with cash flow, because then it doesn't matter. It's kind of like my home that I just talked about. When I built it, so I got a construction loan to build it, and I knew what my monthly payment was the whole time. Now the value went up and down, but it didn't matter because I was good with the monthly payment. So that is for sure. On the value add side, that's where it really starts to get exciting. So perhaps you're buying a business and you put in better systems, better sales programs, or there's chances to merge or roll up and stuff like that. So a little more complicated, but I'm not afraid of buying something that's broken. In fact, I've done probably my best work when I find something that's broken, whether that's a business or real estate. And what does that mean? That means it's lender owned or really poorly managed or heavy vacancy or a lot of expenses or whatever it is. And I think so you want to find that, but you have to have the technical skills to be able to pull that off, or the team. And then you can create what I call forced equity. So, not all deals are the same, but very rarely, again, what I always tell people is no matter what deal you have, there's always somebody with a better plan than you. So that's why I always say when I look at a deal and I pass, and then somebody buys it, and then they do something I never thought of, and I just look at my partner Ross, I go, they had a better plan. So it's always the plan. You see the deal before you buy it.
So our next question, and those listening on YouTube, make sure you ask some questions. I'll try to get to one or two of them. Nina is asking, can we have inflation and rents still go down?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, you bet. It's actually happening right now. So the reason rents are going down or flat, and I'm talking generally, okay, I'm talking about the United States. So the last thing I looked at, there was like 90 metropolitans, okay? So when you look at Phoenix, there's 50 submarkets underneath it. Some are doing well, some are not doing well, some are overbuilt, some are not overbuilt. So, so this is a big general overview. But rents generally are flat right now. So everyone agrees with that. And just go type that in. National Multi-Housing Council, National Apartment Association, Realtors, Zillow, they would all say rents are flat or down. Now, maybe not in your market, but the fact is, and the reason is it's a supply problem. So, and it's temporary. And we keep talking about this. There's anything that's being delivered today in 24 started in 21, 22, period. Right? And so all the supply is hitting, and we like to call it the pig through the python, right? Like it's just moving through the python, and eventually it'll all get absorbed, and it's gonna do that. At the same token, we also have had inflation. So inflation is a little bit different, obviously. So yes, you can have rents go down while there's inflation for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And so this is an interesting comment I want to address from YouTube. John says hyperinflation is not possible with the USD reserve.
Yeah, a lot of people say that. Yeah, you might not be wrong. That's exactly why I said I think it could be a long-term elevated inflation number as opposed to hyper. We always have that. We are the world's reserve currency. And we have the central bank, and a lot of our dollars get exported, and that's going to change under Trump. So right? So at least it going back to his other 4-year term. So we'll see. We'll see where that goes. You know, the world is not happy with the U.S. what we're doing with the U.S. dollar. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, the world's not happy we're inflating it. Does that mean we lose it and it goes to BRICS? Probably not right now. I mean, not in the near future. But, you know, if we're inflating dollars and the reason people in Argentina want U.S. dollars is because the currency's not inflating as fast as their currency.
Right.
But they're in hyperinflation. The rest of the world that's holding U.S. dollars because it was a safe spot is not going to be happy if their dollars that they're holding are losing value. So what does that mean? Well, it's unprecedented, so we don't know.
That's what George Gammon calls the euro-dollar market, which is, it's not measured. How many dollars are actually outside the U.S.? A lot, right? And that's I don't have the technical knowledge. It's above my pay grade. But I do know it's a lot. Like, you think about how many dollars we pay outside of the United States. It's a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, guys. Thanks for joining in, and we'll see you next week.
See you guys.